Voices in the mine. The entrance to the abandoned Donbass mine yawned like a dark wound in the hillside, a scar left from years of forgotten labor and the tragedies buried beneath the earth. Ivan stood at the edge, lantern in hand, the weak flame trembling as if it sensed the weight of history pressing down from the tunnel above. The air was heavy with the scent of wet stone, rusted metal, and something older, something indefinable that clung to the walls like a shadowy residue. He had heard the rumors, stories whispered among the villagers about voices that called from the depths, voices that had claimed generations of miners. Tonight, curiosity outweighed caution, and the draw of the mine was irresistible. Petro, his childhood friend, shifted uneasily beside him. "I don't like this, Ivan. Every story says it's cursed, that people hear things and never come back." His breath formed a thin cloud in the cold evening air, hands gripping the straps of his backpack. Ivan cast a glance at the opening, a gaping black mouth framed by jagged rocks. "We'll be careful. Just a quick look. The old maps show a side tunnel that might be safe enough to explore." His voice, firm but betraying a flicker of doubt, was swallowed by the wind that hissed through the entrance. As they stepped inside, the world outside seemed to vanish. The lantern cast a small circle of light, revealing slick walls scarred with old mining marks and the occasional glint of iron tools abandoned long ago. Every sound, drip of water, scuff of boots on loose stone, echoed, magnified and distorted, creating the illusion of unseen movement. Shadows danced beyond the reach of the flame, forming shapes that resembled figures crouched in the darkness. Ivan's heart beat faster, each thump resonating through his chest like the tolling of a bell. The deeper they went, the cooler the air became, carrying with it a faint, almost imperceptible murmur. At first, it was like the wind, a soft sigh among the rocks. Then the murmurs grew, threading into words too faint to comprehend but undeniably human. "Ivan," a voice called, barely above a whisper, and he froze, lantern trembling. Petro grabbed his sleeve. "Did you hear that?" he asked, voice tight. Ivan nodded, swallowing hard, straining to distinguish reality from imagination. The tunnel ahead seemed to contract, shadows gathering like smoke, curling toward them, beckoning them deeper. Every instinct screamed to turn back, yet something pulled him forward. The mine had a history that was palpable, a presence that seemed aware of intruders. Rusted carts, broken helmets, and abandoned picks littered the floor, silent witnesses to the calamities of decades past. Ivan's mind raced with the stories of those who had vanished without trace, swallowed by darkness and by the voices that haunted it. A sudden drop in temperature made his breath visible in jagged puffs, and with it came a clearer whisper, now unmistakably repeating his name, elongated and mournful, as if the mine itself were testing his resolve. Petro's hand shook on his lantern. "Ivan, maybe we should—" He never finished. A clatter echoed from deep within the tunnel, as if rocks had shifted on their own accord. Shadows twisted, almost sentient, converging toward a darker passageway leading deeper into the bowels of the mine. Ivan's heart pounded, each beat synchronizing with the echoing murmur of voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Hesitation seized him, yet his feet moved forward, drawn by a curiosity that was part fear, part compulsion. The tunnel forked, two paths vanishing into near impenetrable darkness. From the left came the faintest trace of sound, a rhythmic tapping, like someone hammering in the distance, irregular but persistent. From the right, the whispers grew louder, layering into a chorus of murmurs, indistinct but filled with emotion, grief, warning, anger, longing. Ivan swallowed, feeling the weight of centuries pressing on him. Somewhere beyond those shadows lay the truth of the mine, or perhaps the ruin of those who dared to seek it. And as the first chilling words finally broke into clarity, echoing in the stone. "Do you remember us?" Ivan realized that the mine had recognized them, and that recognition was far more dangerous than ignorance. Ivan paused at the fork, the whispering chorus growing louder, pressing against his mind like a tie of ice. Petro tugged at his sleeve, voice trembling. "We shouldn't go further. Something is wrong." But Ivan's curiosity, sharpened by a strange mixture of fear and fascination, outweighed caution. The left tunnel, where the tapping had echoed, beckoned with the promise of discovery. Each step forward carried a metallic echo, reverberating against the jagged walls, as if the mine itself were recording their trespass. The air grew colder and heavier. Ivan noticed the dust on the floor had patterns, irregular grooves that resembled footprints, yet too large, too distorted to be human. Shadows flickered with the lantern's light, forming shapes that almost resembled miners, limbs elongated, faces indistinct. The rhythmic tapping continued, now joined by a low hum, almost like a chant. Ivan shivered, realizing the cadence mirrored his own heartbeat, amplifying his anxiety. Petro's whisper broke the spell. "Do you hear them? They're following us." A sudden clatter of rocks from behind made both men spin around, lanterns cutting through darkness. Nothing, only the jagged walls, silent and motionless. But the feeling of being observed persisted. Ivan's mind raced, imagining the ghosts of miners past, their lives snatched by the mine, lingering in echoes of despair. He recalled tales of men who had entered alone and returned hollow-eyed, muttering secrets they had learned from below. Every instinct screamed to turn back, yet he felt compelled to move forward, toward the sound of that tapping. Deeper into the tunnel, they encountered the first relics of the mine's past. Rusted carts filled with rocks, broken tools, and a half-collapsed ladder that seemed to lead nowhere. Ivan ran his hand along the cold stone, feeling impressions that were almost like fingerprints, as if the walls had absorbed the touch of generations. Then, faintly, a whisper, "Help us." The words echoed, untraceable in origin. Petro froze, face pale, eyes wide. Did you hear that?" Ivan nodded, unable to articulate the fear pooling in his chest. They pressed on. The tapping led them to a chamber wider than the tunnel, with jagged walls and a ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. Pools of stagnant water reflected the dim lantern glow, casting twisted reflections that did not match the shapes moving above them. Shadows moved independently, stretching and curling across the floor as if alive. Ivan noticed one reflection that lingered longer, a pale figure staring directly at him with hollow eyes. His breath caught, lantern swinging wildly, throwing light and darkness in chaotic patterns. The whispers grew more insistent, forming half-words, phrases in a language long forgotten, yet somehow intelligible. "You shouldn't have come, the mine remembers, you belong." Panic surged through Ivan. Every hair on his body stood on end. Petro stumbled backward, knocking over a rusted cart. The sound echoed, amplified, then answered by another clatter deeper in the shadows, as though the mine responded. Ivan reached out, gripping Petro's arm, pulling him forward despite the dread wrapping around them. As they advanced, the whispers merged into a murmur of voices, indistinct but pressing with emotion. Some were pleading, others accusatory, some screaming in anguish. Ivan realized that the mine was not silent, that it had always spoken, its memory preserved in every stone and pool of water. A faint glow appeared at the far end of the chamber, subtle yet distinct, illuminating shapes that resembled miners frozen mid-labor, faces contorted in fear, hands reaching out. Ivan's stomach turned, a cold dread settling in. The mine was alive, not in the sense of flesh and blood, but as a consciousness, aware and waiting. The air grew thick with whispers, their names, their cries, pressing against Ivan's mind. Petro whispered, voice trembling, "Ivan, maybe we should leave now." But Ivan's gaze was fixed on the glow. Something in the depths called to him, intimate and terrifying. The tapping, the whispers, the shadows, they were all part of a pattern he could not yet understand. And as they stepped closer, the reflections in the stagnant pools began to move independently, mirroring gestures Ivan had not yet made, anticipating their actions. A chill swept the chamber, carrying voices in unison. "We see you, we know you." The realization struck Ivan like a hammer. This was not a place of stone and darkness, but a place of memory, hunger, and intent. The mind remembered every life taken, and now it remembered them. Every step they took was observed, catalogued, and perhaps judged. Shadows converged slowly from the corners, stretching, elongating, and the pale glow intensified, revealing more figures, frozen yet alive, trapped between the walls and the echoing voices. Ivan swallowed hard, feeling the oppressive weight of centuries pressing down. He reached for Petro's hand, tightening his grip, and whispered, "We have to see it, to understand." Petro's eyes were wide, fear etched into every line of his face, yet he followed. The mind's whispers surged, voices overlapping, creating a torrent of sound and intent. Somewhere deep within, beyond the shadows and the stagnant water, a low, resonant hum grew, a vibration that rattled their bones. The mind was alive, waiting, and with every step forward, Ivan felt that the mind was drawing them into its story, a story that may never let them leave. The deeper they ventured, the narrower the tunnel grew, forcing them into a single file. Ivan's lantern flickered and swung, its light trembling over the damp, uneven walls. Shadows writhed in unnatural patterns, stretching and twisting like living things. The echoes of their footsteps blended with something else, voices, low and haunting, whispering just beyond comprehension. Petro's breathing came in short, sharp gasps. I can't tell where they're coming from," he muttered, gripping Ivan's shoulder. "It's all around us, in the walls." Ivan swallowed hard, feeling the oppressive weight of the mind pressing on him. The stories the old miners' families had told came flooding back, crews swallowed whole, cries echoing endlessly, sometimes never ceasing. These were no longer tales, the air itself carried the remnants of suffering, woven into the stone. A faint, chilling whisper slid across Ivan's ear. "Why did you come?" The tunnel forked sharply. One path descended steeply, water dripping into a pool that reflected the pale light like shattered glass. The other climbed, walls narrowing and pressing closer, almost claustrophobic. Ivan hesitated, uncertainty gnawing at him. The downward path called with the rhythm of dripping water, each drop like a muted scream. The upward path was eerily silent, yet the shadows seemed heavier, denser. Swallowing his fear, Ivan finally said, "We go down." Petro nodded without protest, eyes wide and fixed on the darkness below. The descent was treacherous. Rocks slick with moisture forced them to move cautiously, each step echoing like a gunshot. Ivan noticed scratches along the walls, too regular to be accidents, deep, deliberate, as if someone, or something, had left messages for intruders. The whispers swelled, overlapping into a dissonant chorus. "Turn back, we are here, see us." A frigid wind swept past them, carrying the stench of decay, and Petro gagged, covering his mouth. At last, they reached a wider chamber. Scattered across the floor were helmets and broken tools, and among them, skeletal remains frozen mid-motion, as if the miners had been caught in the act of work. The pale light revealed shapes that should not have moved, shadows stretched into human-like figures with hollow, accusing eyes. Petro's voice trembled. "Ivan, we shouldn't be here. This It's not just the mine. It's them, the ones who never left. Suddenly, a shadow detached from the wall, moving fluidly and unnaturally toward them, pulsing with pale light. The whispers unified into a single, sinister phrase, "You are ours." The air thickened, icy and suffocating. Faces in the shadows twisted into expressions of torment, some reaching, some pleading, others laughing silently. Then came the metallic clanging from deeper within, deliberate and rhythmic. A hollow, human-like voice echoed, "Join us, forever." Ivan's knees weakened, a shiver running through him. He gripped Petro's arm, but his friend's eyes were fixed beyond him, staring through the darkness at something unseen. The mine had become sentient, aware of their intrusion, guiding them toward a deeper secret, one that could reveal the full extent of its malevolence or consume them utterly. The chamber's shadows shifted as if breathing. Ivan and Petro stepped cautiously, every sound amplified in the stillness. Each flicker of the lantern revealed skeletal figures frozen mid-motion, their hollow eyes staring through the pair, following every step. The whispers, once scattered, now coalesced into urgent, overlapping commands. "Do not resist. Join us. There is no escape." A faint glimmer caught Ivan's eye, a narrow shaft leading further down into the earth, dark and yawning. From its depths, an almost imperceptible hum resonated, a cadence that matched the quickening thump of his own heartbeat. Petro shook his head. "We shouldn't go there," he whispered. "It's calling, something alive, or worse." Ivan hesitated, feeling a pull toward the shaft, a sense that some part of him had been waiting for this, though he could not fathom why. The mind seemed to recognize him, responding to his thoughts, nudging him forward with soft, teasing murmurs, "Closer, closer, see what lies beneath." Each step seemed to echo for hours, reverberating against stone walls that grew impossibly taller, narrower, suffocating. A sudden cold blast extinguished the lantern, plunging them into pure darkness. The whispers escalated into urgent shrieks, deafening and close, as if the walls themselves had open mouths. Ivan fumbled to relight the lantern, his hands trembling. When the light flickered back to life, Petro was gone. Only the echo of his last panicked shout remained, "Ivan, run!" Ivan's panic surged. The shadows along the walls now moved with intent, stretching, curling, forming grotesque shapes, some humanoid, others impossible. The skeletal remains in the chamber seemed to twitch, bones grinding together as if flexing for the first time in decades. A hollow figure detached from the shadows ahead, gliding silently but with purpose. Its eye sockets glowed faintly, and Ivan felt its gaze pierce through him, probing his fear, his doubt, his very soul. A low rumble vibrated through the ground. The mine itself seemed to awaken, a living labyrinth. Ivan's voice trembled as he called for Petro, but only whispers answered, mocking, swirling around him. "He is ours, soon you will be too." The shaft below pulsed with a faint light now, beckoning him. Something ancient, malevolent, and patient awaited at its end. Ivan knew that stepping into it could mean discovery, or death, but staying meant being devoured by the mind's creeping awareness. Summoning every ounce of courage, Ivan stepped toward the shaft, each movement heavy, each breath echoing like a drumbeat in the oppressive darkness. The whispers became a chorus of voices he recognized, the lost miners, friends, strangers, all melding into a single, dreadful sound, "Join us, or be consumed." The shadows writhed around him, closing in, and the mind's intent was unmistakable. It would not release him willingly. Ivan's lantern cast trembling shadows across the walls as he inched closer to the shaft. The whispers had become a cacophony, an unholy choir that wrapped around his mind, threatening to drown reason and will. Every step toward the light felt heavier, as though the very air had thickened into chains. The mind's pulse was palpable now, a slow, deliberate thrum beneath his feet, resonating through his bones. Peering into the shaft, Ivan saw faint shapes swirling in the darkness below. They were neither fully human nor completely shadows, but something between, their forms twisting and reaching, beckoning him with silent, accusatory gestures. Memories of Petro's panicked face flashed in Ivan's mind, his last words echoing like a warning, "Ivan, run." Yet the pull was irresistible, and he felt a strange compulsion urging him downward, whispering promises of truth, discovery, and unimaginable knowledge. As he descended, the walls seemed to close, pressing against him with the weight of centuries. The air grew colder, biting at exposed skin, carrying the scent of decay and damp stone. The whispers became words he could almost comprehend. "We were forgotten, lost, abandoned. Now you are here. Now you are one of us." Each syllable clawed at his mind, tugging at the edges of sanity. Ivan realized the mind did not merely trap bodies, it consumed essence, memories, and will, preserving fragments of the lost for eternity. Suddenly, the lantern flickered violently and went out, plunging him into total darkness. Panic surged, he clawed at the walls blindly. The whispering stopped abruptly, replaced by a silence so complete it seemed to press on his ears. Then a voice, familiar, agonized, Petro's voice, cried out, echoing from all directions, "Ivan, don't listen, don't let it take you." The voice faded into the subterranean gloom, leaving only the mind's cold, inexorable presence. Ivan's hands found a ledge, and he climbed into a wider cavern. There, the pale light of phosphorescent minerals revealed rows of skeletal miners, all frozen in mid-labor, their eyes hollow but somehow aware. And then he saw it, a massive fissure in the rock, from which the shadows emerged, undulating and reaching like a tide of living darkness. One form detached, gliding toward him with deliberate patience. Its eye sockets glowed, drawing him in, promising revelation yet radiating menace. Fear and fascination warred within him. His mind screamed to flee, but his body advanced, compelled by a force older than memory. The shadows whispered promises of joining Petro and countless others, becoming part of the mind itself, immortal and unseen. Ivan felt his consciousness fraying, his thoughts becoming indistinct echoes. He understood now, the mind did not merely consume, it absorbed identity, folding intruders into its history, adding new voices to its chorus. A sudden crash reverberated through the cavern as the shadows surged. Ivan staggered, fighting the pull, but the grip was inevitable. He glimpsed Petro's form in the darkness, reaching out with skeletal hands, urging resistance, yet Ivan's vision blurred, his body swaying, and the mind's hum merged with the whispers of the lost. A final phrase echoed in his mind, "Now, you belong to us, forever." The lantern flickered back to life one last time, illuminating the cavern in stark clarity. Ivan stood alone, yet the shadows had multiplied, every corner filled with silent witnesses. The shaft below yawned like a maw, and the whispers had grown into a dreadful harmony. He took a step, and the mind seemed to breathe with him, welcoming its newest voice. The sound of Petro's warning was gone. The air thickened, the walls pulsed, the mind had claimed him entirely. And somewhere, deep in the labyrinth, new whispers began to stir, carrying Ivan's name. Outside, the wind swept across the desolate hillside. The entrance to the mine lay undisturbed, the faint echo of dripping water the only sign that anyone, or anything, remained below. To the villagers, the mine was silent once more. But in the darkness, a chorus awaited, patient, eternal, and hungry. And now it knew a new story, one that would never end.